week, what we want to do is try to help you to understand a bit more about who Jesus is and to think about what your response is to Jesus. And to do that, we're going to look at some passages in a book written by a man named John. The first thing John tells us about Jesus, he starts right at the beginning actually, and he tells us that Jesus is the creator, that he has made everything that exists. The way John says it in chapter 1, sentences 3 and 4, what he says is through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. It's really a beautiful picture to recognize that all of life was created in Jesus. That's what John says. All of life is created in Jesus. And we have lots of places in the Bible, actually, where we're reminded that Jesus is our creator. There's a beautiful poem in the Old Testament, it's in Psalm 139, and it talks about the fact that Jesus is the one who knit us together in our mother's womb. Before we'd even lived a day, he knew everything about us. He knew everything that would happen. And even it says that he knows our thinking. He knows what's happening in the future. He knows what's happened in the past. It's a comforting thought to know that there is a creator who knows everything about the way that we think and the way that we work and who we are as people, and actually the entire world, that all of life comes from Jesus. But the other thing that John tells us is not just that all of life comes from him, but actually that he's the light of all mankind. All of us are experiencing a lot of uncertainty right now, and the reason for that is because the world is not what God intended it to be. It's broken because of sin, because of wrong things that people do. And because God cares about his creation, he cares about the world that he made, he wasn't going to leave it broken, but instead he decided to send Jesus as a light. That's why John says that Jesus is the life and he's the light. And he describes it in a beautiful way in sentence 14 of John chapter 1. It literally says, you could translate it as saying that Jesus came and he put on flesh and he moved into the neighborhood. And I just love that picture, especially now when we're all quite literally bound to our neighborhoods, that Jesus is right there with us. He's in the neighborhood. Maybe he's living in the house next door. He's there with us, and he's there because he cares about the brokenness around us. He's not okay with it, and he wants to bring us life and hope and light into those spaces. So the question is, if I know that Jesus is the creator, then what is my response? John tells us there's 3 ways that people might respond. Starting in sentence 10, he says that Jesus was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Did you notice there's 3 responses there? The first response is there's a group of people who just don't recognize him. Maybe they've just not spent enough time with Jesus or not spent enough time thinking about God. And so even though Jesus is right there in the neighborhood, he's right there with you, you may not even notice that he's there. The second group of people might actually reject Jesus. They say, I don't want anything to do with it. Maybe you've had a bad experience, or maybe it just isn't for you. And so you've rejected Jesus outright. But then there's another group of people that John says they've received Jesus as he is, as their creator, as their Lord, as the one who brings life and light. And those people become God's children. They have a growing, thriving relationship where God is able to love them. So the question for us today is to consider, 1, to recognize that Jesus is the creator of all things, and then 2, to think about what is your response? What is my response? Am I going to recognize him? Will I reject him? Or will I actually receive him as my Lord and Savior? How would you respond to Jesus today?